had a board in the past. We've had a program for 30-some years. And the early program did have a board, but there's a major difference, and that was an advisory board. I've served on advisory boards. I was on the Alaska Board of Forestry for many years, and advisory boards have a really good function in state government. They vet issues, and they have a lot of influence, but they don't have a lot of direct power. The Coastal Policy Board under this initiative is extremely powerful. It's a regulatory board. They will approve the regulations for the program. They're the ones that get to decide what this program is going to look like. And that's unlike anything we've had under this coastal policy, coastal zone program before. It's a significant difference, and it's one that we find very troubling.
Terzah, is this board much more powerful than any plan we've had in the past?
No, I would say that it's very similar. It's a little smaller than the board.
In number?
In number than we had from 1977 until 2003. In that case, we had about a 15-member board. This one is a 13-member board. So it has been subtly changed. It is representatives of people across Alaska who are nominated through a nomination process from the existing coastal districts that have been in existence since '77. And so there is a nomination process. Certainly elected officials could be nominated, for instance.
But does it have more power than the previous boards?
I would say it's very similar to the pre-2000 version of this, and the regulations themselves will be developed by people who work in state government, who work on regulatory matters.
Well, Rick makes it sound like it's the board that actually determines the regulations, where before it was just an advisory board. Now it is a regulating board. Is that true?
I don't believe so, no. I really believe that this version, and as I've read and done all the research on this, really the checks and balances are there. For instance, some of the structure that we haven't talked about yet is the Coastal Policy Board, the public members and the commissioners, they're all appointed by the governor.
Well, I don't want to get off. I want to try to zero in on this.
Well, no, this is important for credibility of the board.
We have an unanswered question here because we've got two different facts. You're saying the board regulates, you're saying the board doesn't.
Right.
Rick, what proof do you have that this will be an actual regulatory
Well,
board?
during break, I didn't actually bring the ballot measure before me, but I could read it for you. It's very clear. It's a regulatory board, and to suggest otherwise, frankly, it really frustrates me. I get really frustrated with the nature of how this campaign has been going, because let's discuss this on the merits. And if the Sea Party wants to promote a regulatory board, that's fine. Argue why that's an important feature of this measure. But don't just deny that it's not a regulatory board. That's just simply not true, Terzah.
But the regulations will be developed by people who work in agencies who advise this board.
But the board approves it. The board has the ultimate power to decide what the regulations look like. It's in the measure.
Is that true, Terzah? So the state bureaucrats will say, here's what we think the regulations will be, but then the board will say yes or no to those regulations?
They'll come up with coastal district policy plans that will be approved by the board,
So the board will approve the regulations?
Yeah.
Well, how's that not a regulatory board?
Because they actually don't implement those regulations.
But they approve them. So they're the ones who make the final decision. And if they don't like the regulations, then they get to change them and they get to make the regulations they want. So I don't see how you can say it's not a regulatory board.
I just don't see, it is not DNR. It cannot supersede state regulations that are in existence. They're not going to be creating new regulations, and they haven't in the past.
They're going to be approving the regulations that provide the structure and the framework for the Coastal Zone Management Program if this passes.
But will they supersede state regulations?
They will be state regulations. This is a state statute. If the voters say yes to this, it becomes law. It's a 15-page statute, which then leads to regulations which will be approved by the Coastal Policy Board.
How can you say they won't supersede state regulations when, according to Rick, they are state regulations?
They don't. They actually take into consideration the existing regulations and obviously look at those and
But they can add new
those.
regulations.
No.
Rick, can they add new regulations?
They will develop the regulations that guide what this program actually looks like.
But can they make up new regulations?
They will make up new regulations that structure the coastal zone program.
I want to make sure I'm getting a clear answer from you on this. This board will come up with new regulations. It'll be the board. They may not actually come up with it, but they will yes or no implement, veto these regulations. These will be new regulations.
Right.
And you say no.
No. They cannot supersede current state agency regulations.
That answer makes no sense to me, because if this, you can't say the legislature can't pass laws because they won't supersede any other laws. But if they're making new laws, it's all law, and it's new regulations. It's new regulations.
It's a new process.
Yeah, but the whole point is
based on existing
You can't
process.
say it's not a regulatory board just because the regulations that they implement, or the new regulations they bring about, won't supersede old regulations. Well, of course they won't, but there's still new regulations, which makes it a regulatory board.
I just think the definition of regulatory board obviously is a little different
But
here.
they will make new regulations.
What it sounds like you're saying is that somehow this is...
Will this board make new regulations?
No, it does not supersede any of the
No, but
existing
will this board
regulations that
approve
anybody...
or veto new regulations?
No.
It will not have the power to approve or veto new regulations.